Hello, today I'm going to talk about the concept of time and space, then about embodiment, and about destiny and free will. So let's start. So, if we said that everything is coexisting in eternity and timelessness, in eternity or timelessness, as this that universal fact is saying that everything is coexisting, what is then the so-called linear time on Earth, like here? Well, here I have like a film strip, an image, so and I'm going to explain to you. Okay, imagine a film strip with many frames of a runner. In the beginning, take the first few frames, the preparation of the runner before the start. Then the next frames take us the runner who is running, and the last frames take us he is finishing the race. So, and then if you extend this, stretch this film strip, you see that all the frames exist right now in this moment. We have like the first uh, the first frames represent the parallel words of the past. Then the middle ones represent the parallel words of the present, and the last ones represent the parallel words of the future. But all of this is already coexisting in this moment. So, from the higher perspective, the higher self or the soul, the self, is seeing life like a kind of film strips that exist in timelessness. So this is the linear time when our attention, focus, alertness of the higher self to the human uh, mind is flowing through these film strips. We don't see these film strips because this is just an approximation through our own mind how things are working. But this is a good approximation. So the moving of our attention through these parallel frames represents this imaginary linear time. It is some kind of a byproduct of moving of our attention through these frames. And this frame, and in 1 second exist many billions of these frames that we are going right now through them. So all these parallel words represents every frame take as a one parallel word. So in 1 second there are many billions of these frames or parallel words that we are going through. So all these parallel words represent locations. All these parallel words represents locations, spaces, or realities that are comparable to some sort of movie frames, which exist on different vibrations or frequencies, either between 1 second or within the development of our visible universe, of this history that we are calling our human history. So every frame is like a parallel word, location, space, reality. Right now, at this moment, we are traveling with our attention through this a multitude through a multitude of these parallel frames or words. Even though we see only a sum of them in the form of a motion. However, as already said, even while sleeping, when we are perceiving changes, we are also traveling through these parallel words. And even though are these parallel words almost identical. Because as the seventh universal fact is claiming everything is changing, even though are the changes from a certain form of existence undetectable. So what is changing? In all that is, God exists infinite variants of these frames. And when the higher self-attention is flowing through them, this is the motion. This is changing. So what is changing? The frames are not changing because there are infinite variants. They are as they are. But changing is the change is represented by the moving of our attention through these frames, and also the the sequence of these frames is changing because beside destiny we also have free will. I will say about this later. So the change is represented by the moving of our attention to these frames and the changing of these frames through in a line. This is depending on our current alignment, what we're believing, what we are defining things, what we are thinking, emotionalizing, fearing. This is influencing the change of these frames that are still to come. So you cannot stop the moving through these frames. Even when you are in meditation, you're still moving through these frames. But you can change the sequence of these frames, but by your alignment. Okay, now about the relativity of time. So this is all about the concept of time and space. The relativity of time, what I mean by this? The perception of time is relative. It is the domain of change in happening, for example, movement, action, travel, etc., and of our perception, attention toward the change in happening. So the perception of time is relative. This means that it is the domain of change in happening, how much is changing, yeah, and of our attention toward that change. So it can be changing a lot, happening a lot, but if we are sleeping, we're not detecting change. And vice versa, we can have much attention, observation, but there is not much happening. In other words, in general, the more we are attentive to the changes in space, movement, action, travel, etc., the less we have the perception of linear time, since the perception of space and time are inversely proportional. Next, the relativity of time comes most often to the fore when you are experiencing life extremes. So here it is visible, this imaginary linear time. For example, if you are attending an exciting conversation meeting, the time is quickly passing away, gliding away. However, if it is the topic totally uninteresting, then it is dragging on. Of course, this is most often evident when you look at the clock when a task is finished. In fact, realize also this, our inner resistance toward the moment is causing a strong dragging of time, while while the allowance, the quickly gliding away, all until we reach timelessness. The more we are accepting what is, the more time starts gliding away until we reach timelessness. Like for example, you are in a conversation, a good conversation, and then you forget about the time. You are in timelessness because you are allowing. Still, in other words, realize also this: the more high we are in awareness, the more allowing or acceptance exists over the moment. Because the more we are high in awareness, the more we are uh, close to our higher self, which is in this spirit where there reigns timelessness, eternity. So, the more we are of higher awareness, the more acceptance exists toward the moment, toward what is, and so time starts quickly gliding away until we reach timelessness. So this is the relativity of time. Our day has this imaginary 24 hours, but this is an imaginary thing that we ourselves define it. Time in its nature is mostly visible like when the sun is rising and then setting down. This is a day. But everything else, this minutes, hours, this is a thing that we have defined by ourselves. So, regardless of all the mentioned, the day will still last those imaginary 24 hours. But realize this, the living in the moment or timelessness here and now will really ensure that we start living our own imaginary time or rhythm that is going even to slow down the aging of our physical body. So, the more you're living in the moment, but also in this inner peace, bliss, excitement, joy, actually, the more you are slowing down the aging of your physical body. It won't stop, but it is slower. It is slowly aging. Further, the concept of embodiment. What I mean by this, or incarnation. When we say that the soul embodies, we are not talking so much about the embodiment, but rather the directing or projecting of the attention of the self into different parallel worlds and forms of existence. In fact, if it applies that everything is coexisting, then the higher self, does not embody into a physical body, but it is still non-physical in the higher dimensions, where it is right now at this moment experiencing other higher experiences outside of our perception in here. So just a part of the attention, the higher self is focused into this human being, while the 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 attention of the higher self is also focusing to other forms of existence through all that is right now at this moment. So your reincarnation, this old-fashioned reincarnation doesn't exist. It is all parallel, simultaneous right now this moment. Still now you have the the past lives and the future lives in every possible forms of existence, every possible I mean in various forms of existence in various parallel worlds or realities. You can also, this is a very good analogy. Take my hand. For example, the palm represents the higher self of the soul, which is non-physical and has various connections to different forms of existence, to different dimensions right now at this moment. And the energies are flowing from one finger to another, from one life to another, through the higher self. In other words, if it is the first perspective of the self in the fifth dimension, this spirit world, it is another, for example, from the physical, then the third from the subtle astral etheric dimension, and of course, all at the same time. So we have life in different dimensions and densities. So as the higher self, we have the ability to project into multiple parallel worlds simultaneously, also both in past and future of the Earth's histories, because there are many Earth's histories. There are a multitude of Earths. Further, the concept of destiny and free will. We can define the so-called destiny as something that will sooner or later manifest or happen to us in the material world, or in other words, as situations that are going to be inevitable. This is true. However, if you recall that runner from the film strip, then we find out that our path isn't the only one and only. It isn't just a straight line where just one outcome is possible, one destiny, because beside our destiny, we also have the so called free will. So we have destiny and free will, freedom of choice. So we have other movie frames or parallel worlds, location spaces, realities, which can be appointed as possible or potential futures that have just a certain probability of manifestation into our life in our lives. So we have destiny, that situations and people that are going to be inevitable, and we have this free will, freedom of choice, that have just only a certain probability of manifestation that depends on our current alignment. Yes. So here I have another image, just different film strips to represent these potentials, various potentials. I have three film strips. The first film strip represents the one that I explained. So a runner that starts a race, then he is running, and he finishes the race. So the destined thing can be, for example, for someone that he just decide to experience the race, to start the race. But the soul, the higher self of that person intended to experience different outcomes, different potentials. The first one can be just that he finishes the race. The second one, he can come to the podium. He can even win the race. And the last one, he can be that he fall and and go into the hospital. So you choose your destiny before you came here. You come here. So the self, the higher self, the soul, has the free will to choose whatever it wants. I call it the circle. This circle of manifestation. Life is some life. This earthly life is a kind of circle that I call it also as the mission. And inside this mission, he can choose a specified human being, and he put even the ratio between the destined things and the potential things. The destined thing and the potential. So when the soul, heart, self embodies, it experiences this destiny that was before the free will, and it has a multitude of different potentials that are dependent on the current alignment. Even destiny is depending on our current alignment, but if a thing is destined, then our alignment is unchangeable. It is programmed in such a way that you're going to experience destined things and events with different souls, higher selves. Okay, this is basically all for today. Hmm. Okay. Have a nice day. Bye bye.